Sonora, situated in the northwest of Mexico, has a 588-kilometer border with the United States, particularly with Arizona and New Mexico. Additionally, the state shares borders with Chihuahua to the east, Sinaloa to the southeast, and Baja California to the northwest. Sonora also boasts an extensive coastline along the Gulf of California. Upon the arrival of the Spanish, the Cajita group of tribes resided in pueblos and permanent villages along the Macarito, Sinaloa, Fuerte, Mayo, and Yaqui rivers in the coastal areas of southern Sonora and northern Sinaloa. With 18 closely related dialects, the Cajitan group belongs to the Uto-Aztecan language group and is most closely associated with the Pima and Cora languages. Numbering approximately 115,000 at the time of contact, the Cajitans were the largest single language group in northern Mexico, which included the renowned Yaqui and Mayo ethnic groups living in the middle and lower regions of the Yaqui, Mayo, and Fuerte River valleys in southern Sonora and northern Sinaloa. Other Cajitan groups such as the Bamoa, Sinaloa, Tohueco, and Zhuac are now culturally extinct. Residing in the fertile valleys along these rivers, the majority of the Cajita people were involved in agricultural activities, cultivating crops like corn, cotton, calabasas, beans, and tobacco, as well as growing the mezcal-producing agave plant. As the Spanish explorers journeyed north, they encountered a remarkable variety of native communities. In contrast to the more densely populated Amerindian groups in central Mexico, the indigenous people of the north were labeled as a rancheria people by the Spaniards. Their settlements, rancherias, were typically spread out over several miles, with individual dwellings separated by distances of up to half a mile. The distinguished anthropologist, Professor Edward H. A. Spicer, 1906 to 1983, in his work Cycles of Conquest, The Impact of Spain, Mexico, and the United States on the Indians of the Southwest, 1533 to 1960, noted that most rancheria people were engaged in agriculture as their main occupation, while also engaging in hunting and gathering to supplement their food sources. They had a decentralized political structure, with no single tribal chief. The Yaqui Indians were part of the Cajita sub-branch of the Terra-Cahitic group within the Uto-Aztecan family when they first made contact. They resided in the extensive coastal area and valleys of southern Sonora, particularly in the modern-day municipios of Guaymas, Bacum, Cajim, and Impam. The Yaqui rancherias were densely populated and spread out along the middle Yaqui River, where they engaged in floodwater recession farming. It is estimated that the Yaqui population was around 60,000 at the time of Spanish contact. Although the Spaniards had been making occasional forays into Yaqui territory since 1532, the first significant clash with them did not occur until 1607. The Tejano Owadam were previously referred to as the Papago and the Upper Pima, Pima Alto Indians, but the native term is now more commonly used. The Owadam language is often shortened to Owadam. They inhabited both desert and highlands regions of northern Sonora and were nomadic people who built their cultures around hunting, gathering, fishing, and seasonal migration based on the availability of desert and ocean resources. Historian Cynthia Radding extensively discussed the agricultural practices of the Tejano Owadam in her work, Wandering Peoples, Colonialism, Ethnic Spaces, and Ecological Frontiers in Northwestern Mexico, 1700 to 1850. The Tejano Owadam resided in remote ranches, with the largest villages housing around 250 individuals and up to 40 ranch houses scattered over several miles, all interconnected by trails through the desert. The Niboms were Highland Pima speakers who resided in the area between the western edges of the Yaqui River and Seri country along the Gulf of California. They shared linguistic ties with the Owadam, Papago, farmers and gatherers of the desert plains. However, the name Nibom vanished after 1680, and they were then known simply as Pimabajos, with their land being referred to as Primeria Baja. The Pimabajo was physically separated from the Pima Alto of northern Sonora by the Opata and Uives speakers of the Central Highlands. Geographer Carl O. Sauer, 1889 to 1975, mentioned that the Pimabajo had three primary divisions: the Yekra, who lived near the Varohayo, Guarijo, on the borders of Chihuahua and Sonora, the Nibom on both sides of the Yaqui River, and the Ures, who resided in the floodplain of the Sonora River below the Ures Gorge and downstream. The Pima language is part of the Uto-Aztecan linguistic family and is considered to be most closely related to the Terra-Cajita branch. The Operia, located in the central and easternmost sections of Sonora, was adjacent to the Pimabajo. At the time of contact, the Operia was a densely populated area with long-distance trade networks, a well-known peasant base, and a degree of social stratification. The Operia controlled the major river valleys of central Sonora. It was originally comprised of various clusters of agrarian communities which, under colonial rule, converged into a nation with common linguistic roots and cultural traditions. The three primary closely related Indian groups included the Opadas, the Uives, and the Jovas. According to David A. Yetman, an American academic expert on Sonora, the Opada, at the time of the Spanish conquest, numbered about 60,000 and had well-developed military skills. Yetman notes that the presence of defensive tower structures located along the Rio Sonora testifies to their military consciousness. According to Cynthia Radding, the Uives were highland villagers similar to the Opadas in their culture and economy, but distinct in their language. They formed discernible clusters of communities in two separate zones located to the southeast and northwest of the Operia proper. Another tribe, the Jova, lived in rough canyon country, occupying the upper part of the valley of the Yaqui River, and were seasonal agriculturalists who ranged from the canyons and mesas of the western Sierra Madre in Chihuahua to the east of Sahuaripa in east-central Sonora. Yetman describes the Jovas as being subservient to the militarily superior Opadas. Some analysts have described the Jovas as a remnant group that was in the process of being absorbed by the Opada. The Jova language is now extinct. Professor Edward H. Spicer discussed both the Lower Pimas and Opadas in detail in Part 1, Chapter 3 of his 1962 publication, Cycles of Conquest, The Impact of Spain, Mexico, and the United States on the Indians of the Southwest. The Guarijo people resided in a vast area within the western Sierra Madre, along the Mayo River from the Chinipas River to the border of west-central Chihuahua and southeast Sonora. According to David Yetman in The Guarijos of the Sierra Madre, Hidden People of Northwestern Mexico, the early Guarijos likely lived in small, scattered settlements and shared a common identity, language, and culture, known to the Spaniards as Varojios or Warogios. The rugged terrain of steep mountains and deep canyons isolated the many settlements from each other. The Seris refer to themselves as Concac, which translates to the people in their language. However, the term Seri originates from the Yaqui language and means men of sand. At the time of contact, they resided in an area that encompasses approximately 14 municipios in the west-central coastal region of present-day Sonora. Today, they predominantly reside in Punta Chueca, in the municipio de Hermosillo, and Desemboque, in the municipio de Pitiquito, located in the desert region of Sonora. Edward H. Spicer extensively discussed the Seris in Part 1, Chapter 4 of his 1962 publication, Cycles of Conquest, The Impact of Spain, Mexico, and the United States on the Indians of the Southwest, 1533 to 1960.